Alrighty, how's it going, Mets and overall baseball fans? Thank you guys all so much for chiming in for episode 43 of Bleav in Queens. Myself, WardyNYM, that you guys know here on YouTube. That is Joe Serralo, currently in his car. He won't be able to stay for the entire podcast, but he's going to be short, sweet, to the point, because he has some raw emotions and reactions to get to here shortly. And of course, Anthony Recker. We have plenty to deep dive on the latest for the team in Queens, especially with their latest move that we joked last episode saying maybe it's actually going to happen after joking about it. That being in Tommy Pham. It has happened. So we'll break down our raw reactions and analysis to that. We'll also be getting into what is potentially truly the next move for the Mets, along with how is this roster currently looking and much more. But before we get into it all, I have to let you all know that today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs. So make sure you head over to betonline.ag using promo code Bleav at BLEAV. That way you get yourself a 50% off welcome bonus. BetOnline, it's where the games begin. And now, folks, let's officially let the show begin, because I figured let's just start off with the news that just came out at the time of being live here, that being Tuesday, January 24th, around 8 p.m. Eastern time. And that is the results of this year's Hall of Fame voting for the MLB. And Joe, I'm going to just let you take it away, because I know that's why you hopped in this one. You weren't even expected to be in the episode tonight, and yet here you are.
Yeah, I'm in the car, man, next to my dad, going to visit some family. It's Pops' last night in LA. And I couldn't take this episode off after that Hall of Fame announcement. I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet, just like you, Tyler. But Scott Rowland being the only guy elected by the writers to this year's Hall of Fame class is an absolute joke. I mean, you look at the class, and you've got Billy Wagner, the most dominant left-handed reliever of all time. And there's no Met bias there, because Wagner, when he goes into the Hall of Fame, it'll be as a Houston Astro. So, I mean, Wagner just absolutely dominant. Like I said, I know he's got the second most saves ever by a lefty. Mets legend Johnny Franco's the leader there. But Wagner's the most dominant lefty reliever of all time. You've got Andrew Jones, who, you can make your argument. Best defensive center fielder since Willie Mays, Ken Griffey Jr., Andrew Jones, Torrey Hunter. You could say any of those three guys, and I'm going to say you're right. Jones also a guy who could hit 50 home runs in a single year, over 400 in his career. I mean, him not even coming up on 60% of the vote's ridiculous. Todd Helton, Colorado stuff aside, one of the best hitters of his generation. You've got Jeff Kent, who, I know the media hated him. He wasn't the most likable guy. He's a freaking MVP. He's the best power hitting second baseman of all time. You can knock his glove, but offensively, Mad Dog Russo went on MLB Network and made some great points. Jeff Kent, better offensive numbers than Scott Rowland in every statistic. Now, Rowland, 8-time Gold Glover, very deserving of the Hall of Fame, but Jeff Kent to not even garner 50% of the vote while Rowland gets in, that's too big of a disparity right there. And it just shows you that a lot of it has to do with who you make friends with when you're a player, And then the big one, Carlos Beltran, coming in at the same number as Jeff Kent, 46.5%. I kind of knew Beltran wasn't going to get in first ballot, but when you look at his career, 5-tool player, 400 homers, 1,600 RBI, 2,800 hits. The guy could hit for average, could hit for power. When he was younger, he could fly, was a stolen base machine with Kansas City, Gold Glover with the Mets. Beltran did it all, and he's one of the best switch hitters of all time. And for him to not even crack 50%, now I'm sure a ton of it has to do with what happened in Houston, but I thought Beltran should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. I knew he wasn't. I thought he should have been, but definitely deserving of more than half the vote. I'm tired of the writers, guys who couldn't hit a ball off a tee in most cases, determining the fate and the legacy of these athletes. Rec, I'm sure you could speak to it, right? Whenever people come, they come for you with Twitter fingers and whatnot. It's like, I'm sorry, what the hell did you do on a diamond? And it's for these guys' legacies to be in the hands of people who, won't vote for Jeff Kent because he wasn't friendly. It's total crap to me. And I thought this year you had 5 guys worthy of the Hall of Fame, and for only one to get in really pissed me off.
Yeah, I think that was beautifully said, Joe. I really don't think I need to harp on it much more. So before we get you out here, I'm sure you want to hear what Rec has to say. So Rec, where do you align with, I will give the MLB some credit. At least they put a player in this time. Just the fact that we go some years without even one player voted in is asinine in itself. So Scott Rowland, who again, deserving player. However, you already see hypocrisy when a line up when it comes to things like WAR and other statistics as to, like, why did Rowland get in over others, or why was Rowland truly that only player? So let me hear it, Rec. How you feeling about all this?
I'm gonna echo a couple of things. I'm gonna echo that some of these guys, Andrew Jones, Roland obviously got in, Billy Wagner. I myself felt they belonged in. And so it's frustrating. And when you compare careers and some of the numbers, like you guys are saying, some of them stack up pretty darn similar. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense. That said, I'm also, I guess this kind of aligns with what Joe was saying too. I'm not like a first ballot guy. Like if you're a Hall of Famer, you're a Hall of Famer. You either make it or you don't. I don't really understand the whole first ballot thing and waiting till a guy's in his 10th year, like it seems like they're doing with Billy Wagner to kind of finally push him across the line. That stuff just doesn't ring for me. It doesn't make sense. But when I think of what truly belongs in the Hall of Fame, I do have a little bit of hesitancy to just let everybody in. That's not to say that these names aren't deserving. Guys like Todd Helton, guys like Billy Wagner, guys like, Jeff Kent. Look, the numbers are great. The numbers stack up. So in a way, I can't really argue against him. I just don't have the same fire over the Hall of Fame, I guess. I think that's what it is. I don't get as worked up about this. These guys that end up there, for the most part, belong there, deserve to be there. And, if you don't, I get it. I don't believe that it should be all, decided by the writers. That said, there is future, they have the ability to get voted in the future by what is the committee, the Veterans Committee. Thank you. Yeah. And so eventually, I think this stuff works itself out. I don't know. I just don't get as fired up about the Hall of Fame. I don't think that any of these guys are closed case Hall of Famer. Well, maybe Billy Wagner might be the only one, because when you compare him to other relievers, he's top 5 all time. And so that's tough to where do you go with that? If he doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame, then that doesn't make sense. But when you think about all this, when I think about the position players, none of them are like that, automatic, this guy has to be in the Hall of Fame. I just don't feel that way about them. That said, if they got there, I'd be very happy for them, and I would not argue against it either. So I guess that's where I sit. I'm kind of somewhere in that middle ground where I'm not outraged, but I'm also not, I like Andrew Jones' case. I like Billy Wagner's case. Todd Helton, I like it. I'm not, all on board, but I like it. Great player, obviously. Jeff Kent, great player. I guess I just don't get as emotional as Joe does with this.
And Rick, I'm glad you brought up Andrew Jones a couple times there, because I'm actually more pissed off about Andrew Jones than I am even Todd Helton, because at what point is defense going to matter to us? I mean, The guy's got 10 Gold Gloves, and I don't know. You tell position on a diamond. I mean, maybe short, be catchers, but when you've got 10 Gold Gloves at one of the tough positions in baseball, I mean, when does defense matter? 400 home runs are great in and of its own right, but I get it. He was a low average. I don't even know if he cracked 2,000 hits in his career, but 10 Gold Gloves. Torrey Hunter's got 9, can't even get a sniff. We've been talking about Torrey Hunter over here. Does that matter? Do they want the league full of Kyle Schwarbers? I mean,
as the voting process, as some of these younger writers, move forward in their career and they're more prominent, the guys who are analytically driven and have been around the game now, where you're seeing it come back to defense being so important, along with offense and the way they value players, I think you'll start to see a bigger emphasis on what guys did defensively and that getting them into the Hall of Fame. Guys like Nolan Arenado are going to be, boom, you're in. I mean, offensively, the guy is great too, but it's going to be boom, yeah, this guy's in. Just throw him in there. He's first ballot Hall of Famer, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think it's going to come back around that way. Andrew Jones, for me, what I think of when I think of a Hall of Famer, I hate looking at the stats. I really do. I think about, how did I feel watching them? did I truly feel like they were something special? When, do I remember plays they made, where I was, what I was doing? Like, that's to me what I want to, because when you go to the Hall of Fame, that's what you're doing. You're going to see a shrine of what this guy meant to the game. And so that's what gets me, like, that's the emotional part of me. It's that emotional attachment. And that's what I look for in my Hall of Famers. And so, yeah, Andrew Jones, I think about my childhood and I'm like, I mean, there wasn't a year that didn't go by. I mean, that was partly because he was with the Braves. The Braves were very relevant and he was very good, but he even continued that on in his career later. And when you look at the numbers and you attach it to that emotional, bond that I had with him and his career, it all makes sense. And to me, that's when you build that true case of, yeah, this guy's a Hall of Famer. Absolutely.
And staying on the Andrew Jones topic once more, and then we'll wrap things up regarding the Hall of Fame and get you out of here, Joe. I just wanted to touch on the fact that Joe, you emphasized the 10 gold gloves, right? And what's going to be even a hotter debate for years going forward is the lack of consistency on even the gold gloves on who's being nominated for that as is. Because you look at Juan Soto getting a gold glove this past year. I mean, if this guy gets multiple gold gloves for the next 5 years while he stays an abysmal right fielder, again, his defense was really solid in 2021. Then this past year took a complete nosedive, yet he gets the award somehow. I mean, if that's what we're going to base things off of too, we're even in more trouble because they aren't genuine gold gloves. These guys don't deserve it like Soto. I mean, let's be frank here. So you even have to look further at the numbers. Like if you look at Jones's defensive numbers, they are there in his favor. So you can put the gold gloves aside and say that yes, defensively he was an absolute stud for a very long period of time there in the outfield. But this is just another thing that bothers me. There's a lack of consistency, it feels like, in every type of voting route that you go down now, not only with the Hall of Fame itself, but even just the singular awards now and gold gloves, and we'll see when it comes to Silver Slugger. I mean, who knows at this point? It doesn't look good. It's not promising whatsoever.
I'm glad you brought up Juan Soto. -14 defensive runs saved this year. -14.
Oh, he's a stud defensively, clearly.
And by the way, he also got a Silver Slugger award he didn't deserve. If you put his numbers next to Starling Marte in 50 fewer games had more RBI and had overall a better offensive season in right field as a hitter than Juan Soto, who won the Silver Slugger for right field. The only award Juan Soto should have won this year is the Silver Walker, because that's the only thing he did was walk. He didn't hit for power, didn't drive runs in, didn't hit for average. All he did was walk, and he got a Silver Slugger based on that and reputation. But that's a whole nother story. Last thing I'll say to Rex's point of talking about emotion, watching these guys, because Jones, it was like, Mets and Braves going through all those rivalries, playing 18 times a year. Anything that was put in the air, it was like, if that thing doesn't clear the fence, it's caught. And that was the feeling you got watching Jones. The feeling you got watching Billy Wagner was that when this guy came in the ninth inning, the game, you were safe. The game was over. It was like watching Edwin Diaz this year. He wasn't one of those closers who had a lot of saves, but your balls were in your throat every time you were watching him, waiting for the bases to, get loaded or guys to get in scoring position. Billy Wagner came out there and you knew there was a 99.9% chance you were winning that ball game. And there's something to be said for that. He was a sure thing. He, his opponent batting average, his Ks per nine, and all those numbers, comparable, if not some are better than Mariano's. So Billy is a clear-cut Hall of Famer to me. And I think coming in at 68% this year, he'll get in next year in year 9. I'm just like you, Rec. I hate the first ballot versus 10th year crap, because to me, it's almost like a metaphorical version of Napoleonism. You get these little guys, these writers who, have always kind of been, the last ones picked at recess and overlooked their whole lives. And now they get a chance to be the big guy. And they get a chance to say, you know what? Yeah, you're a Hall of Famer, but I'm going to make you wait. I'm going to make you sweat it out because you didn't answer a question 5 years ago in the locker room that I asked you. And they get a chance to finally have a little bit of power that they've never had their whole lives. And they make you, when you should be in year 1, I mean, come on, how many? Hank Aaron wasn't unanimous. How many of these guys? It's ridiculous. The whole first ballot crap. And that's their little bit of power that they get back at the players. And that's why I just don't think that many of them, not all of them, but many of the 400 somewhat of them are deserving of their vote.
Yeah, no, agree, Joe. And again, we appreciate you coming in. I know that you're busy right now, so enjoy the rest of your evening, okay? And Rec and I will take it from here.
Have a great show, guys. I love GM.
All right, shout out for Joe for coming back in. But now, Rec, we got plenty to talk about. So a lot of discussion there. And I can understand from your perspective, too. I'd imagine that obviously it's different from a player's point of view. Because, yes, you grew up a baseball fan rooting for specific teams. But, a large portion of your life since then has been being a player and now doing things like this. So for especially fans, not necessarily as much like myself, but people at least twice my age, when you get to 40, 50 plus, who really got to experience all these players and what they meant. And that'll be me years going forward. I think that there's just a little bit different of a point of view from a player standpoint, obviously from normally just a fan like myself. Not so much now as I think it will be a decade plus from now when I'm more adamant about guys that I watched as soon as they entered the league and saw them retire, because that isn't the case for me right now. So while I agree with everything that Joe had to say and I agree with the numbers, I'm not going to sit here and act like I watched these guys during their prime days, because for the most of them, I did not, just because I didn't have the luxury of doing so. But now let's get into it, because, Rec, it's funny. Last time that we talked, I joked on the podcast and I said, please, hopefully the Mets don't sign Tommy Pham. And the day later, they go and sign Tommy Pham on a
you knew it was happening. You knew it was happening.
It felt inevitable. And it's funny because as a creator, something that I pride myself is, and I do a lot of prep work during the offseason. So when I know that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for the Mets to land specific players, I go out of my way and prep different scenarios should they happen. And when the Pham news that the Mets were showing interest over the past 2 weeks first, I was like, I don't think it's going to happen. So I'm just going to sit back and really not prep.
I don't believe it. Yeah, I don't believe it.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I was like, you know what? Nah, I don't think it's going to. Then it drops the next day after we record episode 42 of the pod. So raw reactions for Tommy Pham, for me at least, is yes, I discussed at length, these quote unquote character issues that Pham has had. However, the Mets, according to Martino and other reports, have clearly done their due diligence and do believe that he's going to be fine in his clubhouse. Now, I've heard from many that in the clubhouse he's been fine with players. I've heard from others that there's been some butting of heads. I think it seems like more of just a personality issue that we've seen with Tommy Pham. He's always been more of a selfish-esque player. I mean, he's a guy that's been let's not forget, I didn't even mention this when I initially broke the news on my channel. What was it, 2 years ago? His career almost ended by getting stabbed multiple times in the back because he got in a confrontation out of a nightclub in San Diego when he was with the Padres. Thankfully, he made full recovery. Then we saw the slap with Jock Pearson because of a difference of fantasy football leagues. So it'll be very interesting to see if you do, in fact, invite him to your fantasy football league at any point in the near future. I'm guessing no there from that shaking.
He's too baller for us. He's too baller. Ain't happening.
But when it comes to what he actually means for the Mets, he really does still fit the bill. As a fourth outfielder, a guy that's not going to be playing every day, splitting time with Mark Canha, getting some time at DH, I'm sure. At 1 year of $6 million in a selfless role versus a selfish one he was in the year prior, signing with the Reds purposely to get those offensive numbers up to hopefully, get dealt somewhere nice or hit the market the following year and get a bigger payday. Now, that didn't really happen. However, 17 home runs, 89 runs scored, just a solid overall season for him, and a guy that, while facing lefties, has always been a good hitter. This past year, he had just under a 800 OPS. Mark Canha had around a 740 OPS against lefties, so we're going to see them definitely split time there in left field. And for Canha, who doesn't play every day and has thrived in that limited role with the Mets, I'd expect Pham to do the same. And with that clubhouse led by Buck Showalter, Max Scherzer, and Justin Verlander, I do believe that this is a situation that will benefit Tommy Pham, and the Mets will benefit from having this type of quality depth over, the Khalil Lees, the Nick Plumbers of the world. I mean, this is a clear upgrade at the fourth outfield / platoon DH position. So let me hear your thoughts on the move.
I go a little bit different. The character issues, whether they're real or not, I'll just put that aside, and I'm going to go with Tommy Pham as a player.
Yeah.
Offensively, you can see some of the appeal, right? As a platoon type player, especially against lefties. But it's still not significant, which is okay for 1 year, $6 million as a bench role, fourth outfield type. They don't have to be significant. The thing that bothers me is fourth outfielder means if there's an injury, or should I say when there's an injury, because there will be. That's inevitable. You're not going to have, Canha, Nimmo, and Marte in the outfield for 162. It's not going to happen. This guy's going to play the outfield for you. Have you seen his defensive numbers?
They're not good.
They're really bad. They're not just not good. They're really bad. Over the last 4 years, he has a negative 23 outs above average. Negative 23. You have to try to be that bad. That's awful. He had a negative 10 in 2020, 19, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, all I'm trying to say is I think they could have done better with a fourth outfielder. I would have been okay. And to be honest with you, he doesn't bring stolen bases. That has declined over the course of his career. He barely runs anymore. Offensively, there's not a ton of pop in his bat. He's not hitting a bunch of home runs. Those numbers have actually declined over the last several years. So when I think about what Tommy Pham brings, I just don't see it from a playing, like just from a pure player perspective. I'm not seeing the type of, I guess, upside that I like to see in my players. Even if it's a fourth guy, it doesn't have to be an all-star. That's not what I'm saying, but just someone where I see the numbers going in the opposite direction in some way, right? We're already saying this guy is a limited platoon player, but we're also admitting he doesn't run well. He doesn't play defense. So you're describing a DH that isn't. You can say anything and everything you want about Darren Ruff, and I know he was very bad for the Mets last year. I would honestly probably rather have him in the lineup against lefties as DH than Pham. Not saying I'd rather have him in left field, but their numbers are pretty similar defensively, so it's not like you're missing or gaining much by having Pham out there. So to me, it's a repetitive roster spot, and that to me is a little bit confusing, even though it's only $6 million, which you see that. So to me, I'm not trying to say it's a bad signing because I get the depth. He's still a better option than, some of the minor league depth that may have filled that role. But it does confuse me as to why there wasn't a different route they could have taken to fill this spot via trade, or obviously, they weren't able. I can't think of the left fielder that Boston signed, Duvall.
Yes.
They weren't able to land Duvall because they couldn't offer him the playing time, which I understand.
Correct.
And so I get that from his perspective. But you'd like to think that there were other options they could have made on a trade market in a trade scenario that at least would have offered them much more upside than a Tommy Pham. And if not, honestly, why not stick with what you have in-house? Because it is a redundant, repetitive roster spot to me that they filled. And then you throw in any possibility of clubhouse, interference. And that just throws, I'm good. I don't need a guy like that.
Yeah, well, again, I don't believe that there's going to be a clubhouse interference, because if there's anything that Tommy Pham brings that is a negative thing to this clubhouse, I'd imagine he wouldn't stay on the Mets lawn. I'd imagine he wouldn't even finish the year with the Mets if that became an issue once more. So that's a wait and see. But talking about the player production and what we know him for, I'm in a slight disagreement with you. And the only reason why is it really all comes down to how much of a role will he have on this Mets team for me. If he is going to stay true to strictly that fourth outfielder, platoon, DH, potentially at times Vogelback. And again, the Mets are going to be changing this by the day with the type of production that they're going to get from their young guns that we're going to get into a little bit later in the show. But really, it's the role of he's not going to be playing every day. Okay, he has more pop. The Mets need pop. It might not be much, but I mean, adding 17 home runs to this Mets team versus what they had last year. And let's do a comparison for a second. If you look at the Mets,
you say adding 17 like he's going to add 17.
No. He won't.
And he's
because
not.
He'll be in a limited role. I'd like to clarify that he won't. The point is,
what did he have? 500 plate appearances last year?
You're gonna laugh. Guess.
Go ahead.
622
and 17 home runs. That's pathetic.
Yeah.
That's sad. That's really bad. You want to hit.
I know you would have done
my
better,
entire
Rick.
career. My goal was to hit one home run every 20 at bats. No, I wasn't going up every time I was up there. Oh, I haven't hit one in 21 ABs. Oh crap! But that's like a standard for someone who has some pop. One every 20. That would mean with 600 at bats, you'd be hitting 30 homers. Right? I mean, we're not talking about 600 bats. We're talking about 600 plate appearances.
Yeah.
But I'm going to guess it's roughly 550 at bats. Then you should be hitting 25, 27 homers. That's having pop, not 17. That's that's Wilson Ramos all over again. Like, oh, he hit 12 homers. He had 500 ABs. He should have hit 25 homers. Like that's not pop to me. And so I don't see that as an upgrade in any way based off of their last year's team. I would rather just have Canna out there every day possible and not even consider Pham for anything.
Well, that's the thing though. Canna can't be every day. And that's why the Mets are being very strategic about having him play either every 2 or 3 days. 3 rarely. And the reason for this is 2 things. One, it seems like he's definitely dealt with some health issues over the years that's kind of stayed in-house in the clubhouse, and that could go in hand with him getting hit as much as he is. I mean, he could be dealing with bumps and bruises that are more nagging. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like that's something that can go in hand for a guy that's usually towards the top of the list and is older than, say, the Brandon Nimmos and the McNeils of the world on this team that also deal with their fair share of hit by pitches. I mean, Canna led the league out of the AL when he entered with the Mets.
Yeah,
so I think that's the rooted
couldn't
reason.
You slide McNeil to left for those days then and put Escobar at second and hopefully have Baty play third base? Like,
you could,
those are the kinds of options that I would rather see than have Pham on this roster. And that's where I say I doesn't make sense to me. So I understand what you're saying. It's not a bad, like having Tommy Pham on your team. It's not a bad thing. This isn't like a terrible baseball player. I just don't see the appeal for this roster and the way it's constructed right now.
Fair enough. And for me, I look at this simply as, okay, left field last year, besides Canna, fourth outfielders, the Mets had Travis Jankowski, who, again, was a very good defender. Wasn't complaining about him, but had no offense. Then you had the limited role of the Coyleys, the Nick Plumbers, due to injuries. DH-wise, the entire first half, you had Robinson Cano for the first 20 games before you cut him loose. Then you had Dom Smith and J.D. Davis, were both anything but consistent. I mean, they could not get the job done. Then the trade deadline comes around. That 1 month, they were phenomenal. I mean, this Mets team looked like it finally made the proper moves to round out this roster with Vogelback, Ruff, and Naquin all thriving in the DH and / corner outfield role, corner outfield being Naquin. Then you get into the month after that, and so on and so forth for the remainder of the year. They all struggled to a degree with their production. And defensively, Naquin was not good. We were aware of that. He wasn't a solid glove. He's athletic, but it doesn't mean that he's a good glove even in the corner. I think when you look at everything that you got last year, especially in that platoon role with Canna, putting aside Jeff McNeil and his ability in the corner, I just don't see how Tommy Pham is necessarily, I don't think he's a negative, and I think that he will be a little bit more of a plus, a surprise than what we initially think. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. Again, I am someone that was not in favor of Pham, and it seems like the Mets unfortunately got dealt a bad hand when looking at the outfield options because, again, Adam Duvall, 1 more playing time, goes to Boston. Makes sense. So it got $7 million over 1 year. I mean, it wasn't about the money difference here between the Mets. The Mets had an offer for Duvall. We just don't know the numbers. They had the most money on the table for Andrew McCutchen, who, again, Kutch would have loved not only for the clubhouse, still a solid player, not good defensively at all in the corner anymore, but can be more that DH type, especially against lefties, should they wish. He goes to Pittsburgh on a pay cut because he wants to round out his career there. Trey Mancini, not going to play in the outfield, signs a 2-year deal with the Cubs. So you look at the list and it quickly limits, and the Mets found themselves in a spot where they really just needed someone that was willing to commit to a limited role, and Tommy Pham was able to do that. So I think if they had more options, they certainly would have seeked those before doing the Pham decision. I assure you it probably wasn't their number 1 pick to start the offseason.
No,
and that's where the
wasn't.
Correa sweepstakes,
No,
you have to wonder if that factored in at all with getting this type of decision done. But yeah, no,
I think it absolutely did, because if Correa's on this team and he's playing third base, you hope 120 to hopefully 140 games on the year, then that does give you the option to move McNeil to left a little bit more often, get Escobar some playing time. You can play around with some of the players a little more, and knowing that you're going to get very good production out of that third base spot. And right now, that third base spot is still a question mark, as far as what they're going to get. It could be good. It could be below average. They don't know what they're going to get out of that position right now.
Yeah. And that's fair. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the Mets are going to go about this season, because I think this is a good transition now into, let's start with, okay, what is next for this team? Because on the thumbnail, if you're watching on YouTube, I have on the left, I have Andrew Chafin, who I know is your favorite reliever in the league right now, because that is a move that I do believe is going to be next for the Mets. If not Chafin, it definitely looks like it's going to be a lefty. So my question to you is, and this is on par with what the Mets are hoping to do. It seems like they really want to add at least one more lefty reliever. I think that is not only the likely move, but the realistic move that the Mets make next or over the next weeks, whenever it's going to be. It's a quiet time in the offseason with, less than a month away for spring training or so. So we still got some things going on there. But you look at the lefties out there. They've been linked to Andrew Chafin, who I personally am a big fan of. I know that you're a little bit different. Zach Britton, definitely wouldn't mind him on a flyer for sure if he can bring any life back with that fastball and get that command. But then you look at the other guys out there, and there's a couple that are interesting to me. One who I'm not in favor of, but I know he's out there, didn't have a bad season last year, but also wasn't in high leverage situations, and that was Brad Hand. And then Matt Moore, who did a great job for the Texas Rangers last year, transitioning into that bullpen role. So for you, out of all those guys, who do you personally like most? And secondly, is there any of those guys that you feel that you can trust to a degree in high leverage situations? Because outside of Andrew Chafin, I really don't know if I can for any of them.
I love Zach Britton. He would be my favorite out of those guys. But he's a question mark. So I'm going off of potential and what he could be, because he could be a high leverage back end bullpen ground ball machine, left on left, right. It doesn't even matter. Right on left doesn't matter. He can get everybody out. That said, because they have, when we talked about Chafin, that was before the Bruce Raley move even happened. I wouldn't mind if they signed Andrew Chafin. So I say that, then it was, if that's going to be your one lefty in the pen, if that's going to be your move for a lefty, I've got some, I'm a little bit worried. Not that he hasn't shown that he can do it, and not that he might not do it. I've got a little bit of worry in the back of my mind. When you've got a guy like Brooks Raley, who I like and I trust, and I think is a very good left on left option, that opens the door for a guy like Chafin to come in and not have to be the guy. So, when I talked about him in, whatever episode that was, we can go back and it's not going to be quite the same kind of conversation about Chafin. Now, I would not mind at all if the Mets brought him in. In fact, honestly, when you look at some of the depth they have as far as relief options, I think the Mets look fantastic out of the bullpen right now.
I think the bullpen's already one of the better ones in baseball. I really
100%.
do.
I really do. I think would it kill them to add one more guy like a Chafin or a Britton? No, it'd be great. Like I love that, and I think that solidifies them is like a top 5 type bullpen. But I think where they're at right now with the depth that they have, some of the guys that are already slated to go to AAA, assuming most guys stay healthy, I think this team looks great because they're going to have options to call up when things hit the fan, when they have to move McGill or Peterson into the rotation. Like, they have guys to play with that they're set up really well right now. And I like this bullpen. So you take a flyer on Britton, you take a flyer on Chafin. I would definitely take Matt Moore over Brad Hand. I'm not a Hand fan. I wasn't last year, whenever that was.
I like how that rhymes. That's stupid.
I mean, like, whenever they were linked to him last time, I don't remember if it was last offseason or the offseason before. But I didn't like it then. I don't like it now.
Well, Hand was a Met. You remember that, right?
Yeah. He came over late in the year for a little bit. I do remember that. And it was, to me, his stuff has diminished greatly. And even when he was right, I just wasn't a huge believer in him. It's not to say that look, good pitcher. Obviously, he's had a very good career. But his stuff has really fallen off, and he's not the same guy at all that he was in his heyday, if you will.
Yeah, Matt Moore's interesting to me because you look at his numbers, not only, with a great season, Baseball Savant, they look fantastic, as does Brooks Raley, might I add. I'm really excited for Brooks Raley. I think a lot more than I should be just for a lefty reliever. But after seeing what Joey Rodriguez and Chasen Shreve gave you this past year, there's reasons to have excitement over the type of year that Raley had overall. But you look at Matt Moore, he's interesting. I'm a little surprised he's still on the board. Maybe it's because, it was his first year kind of really fully transitioning into the bullpen, was a starter for a while, struggled when he came back overseas, here back to the States with the Phillies in 2021, was not good. I think he might have had like one good outing against the Mets to start the year, but that was about it. So he's interesting. Chafin, of course, I like. And one thing that I am curious to see if the Mets do is, if they don't land any of these guys, Andy Martino did make note that the Mets are still interested potentially more in relievers that have options. kind of like how they've done their pickups of the Steven Ridings of the world and some others that they've done over waiver claims or the Rule 5 draft, for example.
Mhm.
And who is it? Is it
Zach Green?
Zach Green, yeah, I thought so. So maybe they will look for younger guys, and if they do, could we maybe see them do a trade for a younger, higher upside reliever? I would love that. I'm not opposed to that at all. I think if you can get younger, by all means, go ahead and do it. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do on the bullpen front. But it does feel, as of now, at least, that is the next likely move for them. So now this is the big discussion tonight, because last episode we talked about a lot of bad options for the Mets, more so with the assumption that the Mets wouldn't make a move via free agency for a fourth outfielder. Now, we were corrected wrong literally like 24 hours after our episode. But looking back now, do you believe the Mets are still going to go and land a bat this offseason? And should they not, how are you feeling about the current construction of this lineup and roster overall? Because I've got plenty of things to say about it. Positive, still some negative, and I feel like we're going to be more along the same wavelength. But do you think that they're going to make another move, or you think they're done?
I don't think there's a significant move coming. Nothing that's going to shake up the starting lineup in any kind of a way that, would really make you feel that much better about it. I think the way the roster is constructed, I think pitching, they look pretty good to really good. I think it depends on. I don't love the idea of having a 38-year-old and 40-year-old as the two guys you're going to be counting on all season, and then come the playoffs. And I know people will say, well, you can rest them. You could do well, they don't play in a division where that might not be a possibility.
That's a good point too.
There's a good chance that the Phillies are winning 95 games. There's a good chance that the Braves are winning 95 games.
Even the Marlins are making
automatic?
solid moves lately. Like, and for
What's
their
that?
offense, at least.
The Marlins
are even getting better.
The Marlins,
so.
I liked them last year, and I'm always a year early on a team. I'm always a year early. And on a player. Like when I play fantasy football or even baseball, which I'm getting back into, I haven't done it since college. I'm always a year early. I'll draft a guy. Oh, he's going to go off this year. Doesn't happen. And then I stay away from the next year and he goes off. I was on the Marlins last year, and I'm worried that they're going to be like that weird team that something clicks. You don't see it coming. They're going to be the Giants of 2 years ago, and they're going to win 90 games. And you're going to be like, what happened? Because they have the pitching. That pitching is phenomenal. And what they were able to do now with that lineup and moving Jazz Chisholm down in the lineup is going to be
playing center field, which is crazy.
I think that's going to be really, really big for them. Araya's coming in and leading off now for them, brings him down in the lineup, and it gives them the opportunity to drive in some runs finally. They still don't have enough offensively by any means. Don't get me wrong. But pitching, they have it. They have the starting pitching and they have the bullpen. So this division is going to be really hard. I just don't see the Mets being able to, rest these guys as much as maybe they want to and still walk away with the division. They didn't even win it last year. So that's going to be tough. Their bullpen looks great. I do like their starting pitching. It's just tough for me to, like I said, put all my eggs in those baskets that are a little bit older. Now, from the lineup perspective, they're good. They're going to score runs. Like, don't get me wrong, but they're going to have the same problem that they had at times last year, that you can't always count on stringing hits together. It's not always going to happen, especially when you get into the playoffs and you're facing the best pitching staffs in baseball. Yes, they can add at the trade deadline, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about what does this roster look like right now. And to me right now, it's still lacking at least one high quality bat. And that's the one thing that I like. You can pretty much make a point to any team in the big leagues. You can find a weakness. And that's the Mets' weakness right now. Their lineup is good and it will score runs, but it will dry up come playoff time if they don't do something different, or if Alvarez and Baty and some of those question marks don't answer the call like we think they could. Now, if they do, and right now, the way it's constructed, they're not starting in the big leagues. At least that's what you're hearing, right? Like Baty might, but Alvarez, it's There's a
Yeah,
pretty good chance
Alvarez
this
is
guy's
likely going to
in
start the year
AAA.
in
Like
AAA. Yep.
he's in AAA, so you can't count on that. So I'm thinking about the roster from that perspective, and I'm saying, yeah, they need a bat. Now, if one of them or both of them come through and come up this year, maybe Vientos even, like, I mean, Ronnie Mauricio could show up this year. Like, who knows what could happen? And they could have some bats that come up from the minor leagues, and that would be fantastic. But right now, they're still missing that. That's the only drawback to this roster, and the older, starting 1-2 starting pitchers that they're relying on.
And it's a frustrating drawback too, because we've seen
It
this
is.
from a mile away.
It's been over and over again. It's been
yes,
year after year.
It's the worst feeling when you can see this, the management knows it, and yet they're pretty much in that spot. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I want to harp on Brett Baty for a little bit here in a second, but before I do, I'd like to add, as I always say, I'm in favor of the kids' game playing time, especially at positions where the Mets don't have, dominance or superiority for the most part. They certainly don't have that at the hot corner and at the catching
Let
position
Baty
from
play.
an offensive standpoint.
Give him 100 games.
So I'm not opposed to that. It's just the fact that, again, you're banking on a massive uncertainty entering the year for a team that has not only playoff aspirations, but by God, isn't just trying to get past the wild card. They're trying to win the whole damn thing. So when you have this aging rotation as is, front line by two studs who literally are basically 40 at this point, right? And then you have all these core pieces, that's what made us so enamored, at least for me, in love with Correa when it looked like it was going to happen, because it felt like that was luxury, and it was just adding exactly what you wanted to get protection with Alonso. Now that you don't have it, okay, we go back to square one again. Let's talk for a second about Brett Baty. I just did a video on him yesterday or so, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with him this year, because one, I'm really happy with how he's taken the whole Correa situation. He did an interview one-on-one with Anthony DeComo recently, explained, he was ready to shift to left field right away if Correa was going to be met. And that's the exact kind of mindset you want from someone like Baty. Two, he was, of course, a little relieved when Correa didn't happen, just in the sense that it's better for him and his production and trying to get better at third base. He spent pretty much the entire offseason back in Texas in his hometown working on his defense, which is great, and is expected to arrive in spring training at least a month early. And one thing that he's really going to benefit from actually is going to be the World Baseball Classic, because both Mark Vientos, Eduardo Escobar, they're going to be representing their respective countries. So that's going to have all eyes, all focus on Brett Baty for the majority of spring training, starting at the hot corner. And we saw Baty, again, a sub 200 average in 40 play appearances means nothing. You saw the ability with the bat, has a lot of power, can hit for opposite field, will take advantage of not having the shift as well this year. I think that's really going to benefit not only him, but every single hitter out there, right? So a lot of things are going in Baty's way right now to prove, and he's going into the spring training not only with the mindset of becoming the Mets starter, but I do believe that there's actually a stronger chance than what people are giving him credit for to be the Mets starter if he goes out and balls out in spring training. He has the size, he has the bat to ball skills. He was just ranked number 2 as the second best third base prospect in all baseball, according to MLB.com's Jonathan Mayo, with only Gunnar Henderson ahead of him, because Henderson's going to get the bulk of playing time at third for Baltimore this season. And again, understandably so. But when deemed who has the highest floor, Jonathan Mayo said it was Brett Baty, just because of that bat to ball skills. He truly believes that at his worst, he's still going to be a very solid bat at the MLB. And for the Mets here with Eduardo Escobar, and again, we love Eddie, love the personality. He was Mr. September for us, but we all know the story with him too. If he comes out and has a bounce back year where he's more consistent, then great. All power to him. That's great for this Mets team. We just want what is best for this team. But Eddie was quite literally abysmal outside of the month of September. And those couple home runs he had to start like July or whenever it was. Yeah, that's really the big thing. I think it's time to really see what you have in Brett Baty, because if you do have that potential with him for a guy that you don't want in a platoon role, this is different than Alvarez, because Baty is a guy that you do not want to be brought up in a platoon role and only facing, right-hand pitching, in my opinion, because that can only hurt his development. I think you want to bring him in, get him adjusted, and have him playing every single day. And should he do that, that could be the bat that the Mets have been looking for all over this past year. Because I like this team. I do think that their offense is better entering this season, plenty more potential, but whether that potential executes or not has yet to be seen. Look, you're entering a year instead of Robinson Cano, Dom Smith, JD Davis at your DH for the first 80 plus games. You're going to get yourself, that being in Daniel Vogelback, Tommy Pham, Darren Ruff, I don't think is going to be on this roster personally, but he's just a lingering name there right now. Overall, I think that's more
injuries happen, right? You never know what can happen.
I think you still have a lot more consistency at that DH position as is than what you had for the whole first half of last year. Okay, that's an upside. Then third base, Brett Baty wasn't even a thought for the Mets, let alone us fans, until down the stretch way into the second half of the year. If he does produce and say becomes a 15 home run guy for the Mets next season, maybe 50 plus RBIs, that's more production potentially than what you're getting with Eduardo Escobar on an everyday basis. We don't know if he's going to look better or decline this upcoming year. I mean, Eddie might even look best in DH. That's a role I could see him doing really well in too, honestly. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen with Brett Baty, as I am with Alvarez. I don't think it's going to take terribly long for Alvarez. I think we might just not see him for upwards a month. And I think he's going to honestly hit the bigs. I don't think it's really going to take him long personally. It might even be sooner than expected. But Baty feels like that guy where all the eyes, all the focus is on him. And I truly do believe that he's going to take advantage and hopefully be that missing piece for what this Mets team needs. And I know we have Mark Vientos too, and Marky V, maybe he'll do something for us at DH, but there's big looping hole in that swing, and defensively, it's just not there. Maybe he'll wow us a little bit at the World Baseball Classic, and that will transition over into the Mets should he start the year on the roster. Again, upside with the Mets and their young studs offensively, but more than anything, we just don't know. And that's why we're all.
I think that's what's fun about this team, though. There is upside from the minor league players for the first time in a long time. The guys that are on the cusp, ready to come up. There's upside, major upside there, potential, impact potential. When's the last, prospect you could say that about since, Pete and McNeil and those guys came up, right? Like there hasn't been over the last 3 or 4 years. So that's going to be really big for this team. And the fact that it's coming up to a team that is as well-rounded as the Mets seem to be, that's the exciting part. And I think, we're calling out some negatives here, but I think we've both echoed this roster is good. Like this roster is going to win 90 plus games, 95 plus games. I'm not going to say 100, but maybe 100 games. It's the Mets are in good shape right now. Can they stay healthy, and can they take what they built last year and build more on top of that? That doesn't mean they have to win more games. It just means they have to be ready to, do the things that they need to do for 162 again, get to the playoffs, and hopefully make a better run this year, deeper run.
Yeah, deeper run. That's the biggest thing. And I really don't think I would amplify it nearly as much if the Mets didn't have, again, a rotation headlined by the guys that they have a headline. I honestly think it's a little bit of a different discussion here if your rotation was far younger and this was a Mets team that, again, was really just starting to get on the cusp of this core group. But because they're not, that's why the expectations are just through the roof. And I think a lot of people are really sleeping on this offense too, to be honest with you. I think everyone just thinks that the Mets in the final month of the season were their entire identity for the entire year, and that wasn't true. I mean, the Mets were a top 5 offense last year. Don't get me wrong. I think it needs to be better. I think there needs to be more
fifth in runs scored, I believe, right? Which is the only stat that really matters.
Seriously. You need more run production, not only from the power around Alonso. I think that's crucial. And that's something that I hope the Mets get from the young guns or somewhere externally throughout the year. But aside from that, just the core group as is. I mean, let's not sit here and act like these guys are, going to slouch around and do nothing. We'll see how the year goes on and how it starts, but there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this Mets team. I don't believe it has all these gaping holes in its offense. It just, in my opinion, I think it's still missing like that one strong piece, which lose me once more to Correa. But I think that's all that needs to be harped on there right now regarding the offense. We'll see what happens. If any moves happen, we'll, of course, discuss it. I'm sure I'll discuss some potential external options in the near future because nothing's impossible with this team. I don't think it's as likely, but I do think it's wrong for the Mets to not at least do their due diligence in the trade market, which I'm sure they already have started doing and have throughout the months. But before we wrap the show up, I do want to get to some comments if anyone has some questions here in the live show, but also shout out everyone that's watching. This is episode 43, Bleav in Queens. Myself, Wardy, that's Anthony Recker. As always, we're coming at you every single week, covering all you need to know about the Metropolitans. We have a big season coming up. Really excited to get it going. It feels like it's going to be here before we know it. But I did see some donations here on YouTube I'm going to get to. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe on if you're watching the show live or on replay on YouTube on the WardyNYM YouTube channel. And of course, make sure you rate, review wherever you get your audio podcasts. That's greatly appreciated too. Let's see. Ed Flood, this was from earlier on in the show. He says, writers that didn't vote for Beltran should be forced to give us a baseball reason as to why Beltran isn't there. They can't. That's the issue. I mean, baseball reason aside from the cheating scandal with the Astros, I mean, we're talking about him as a player. Yes, I agree. They probably can't give you much there. And I think if there's one thing that bothers me about this, and I'm curious if you agree or disagree with this, Rec, is we've seen what a lot of players over the years in the Hall of Fame voting, where it takes them like 5-6 years. What has changed over that time? Nothing. It's just been opinion. And, the writers are growing on them more and being like, you know what? Maybe I was too hard on him the first 3 or 4 years. I should let him in now. I mean, the statistics, the production can all be there. I think Carlos Beltran is certainly deserving. I did not think that he was going to be first ballot. I think we had a little bit of a disagreement. I think it was Joe and I think Joe was a little taken back when we first discussed this episodes ago, because I believe that the cheating scandal would be the exact reason as to why he doesn't get in. And he got around 49% of the vote the first time around. So what's your thoughts, if you have any, regarding players that get in like multiple years, for example, after there's been some controversy with them that is aside from what their production is? So we're not talking steroid level. This is a cheating scandal with the Astros that is a very unique one.
Yeah, no. I kind of touched on this earlier. I don't get it. You're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. First ballot, second ballot, third ballot. It doesn't. I don't get the whole waiting to vote for someone. Now, if there are 10 names on there that are more deserving than the guy that you didn't vote for, whatever, that's fine. That's your opinion. But not voting for someone because it's their first time on, I don't understand that. I think the cheating scandal absolutely hurt Beltran. And I'll say this. This isn't, a knock on Beltran. This is more along the lines of Beltran's one of the first guys whose majority of their career, right? Like majority of his big numbers came after I'd already been drafted.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard for me to say Hall of Famer or not, because I wasn't paying attention. I really wasn't.
Yep.
Not to that level. When you're in the minor leagues grinding, I didn't give a crap what was going on in the big leagues. I really didn't. I didn't know. You see the highlights, you watch some games, but I didn't care. It was all about like, how do I get out of there? Like, how do I get out of here? What do I need to do?
You're focused on you yourself.
I'm focused on my team. I'm focused on what I'm doing, like trying to get better every day. And so it's hard for me to even offer an opinion on Beltran. When I think about his career, I don't have Hall of Fame like feelings towards him. But again, that's because I wasn't watching. I wasn't involved in that. Roland is interesting for me because I grew up a Philly hater, even though I grew up near Philly. But of all things, watching him in St. Louis, I remember how great this guy was at third base. I remember some of the big hits he had. And of course, funny enough, like I ended up getting to talk to him a little bit at the end of his career when he was, I think, with the Reds and spring training. And so I had like a memory with him, but I also remember him playing in his prime and some of the great things he did. So to me, that invoked some of that, like, yeah, Hall of Famer. So it's like it's a weird, I'm kind of stuck in that.
It comes down to the experiences, as you said, mm-hmm. right? Like, who did you idolize growing up and were worth it? Because for me, I'm in the same boat as you regarding Beltran. I did not watch Beltran nearly as much as other Mets fans have, because again, with everything that was happening in 2006, for example, even though that's the Beltran memory Mets fans don't want to hear or talk about. I mean, I was only 6. So it's different for me. So years down the end, when we have discussions of, Jacob deGrom, for example, Pete Alonso, the list go, like, I'm going to be as passionate, as adamant as ever, because I watched every single day of these players.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't miss a beat with them. So I completely get what you're saying from that standpoint. Edwin, other donation says, how would a wreck look with the chafing mustache? How
I
would
can't grow a chafing mustache.
if you could though, would you
This
one, if
thing's
you
so
could, would you
thin,
rock it? And two,
so thin.
how much would your wife despise you or love it?
She would absolutely despise it.
Oh, does she not
And
like facial hair on you at all?
no, it's not that.
Okay.
I just think like a thick, like, like just, stash, even like a little bit of a, Fu Man, like, no, like that's not her style, not my style either. Would I do it? Yeah, I would do it because I'm like one of those people I'm not looking for attention, but I'll just do it to make people laugh. Like yeah, why not? Like throw it on there, see what happens, see if I get some laughs out of you, and then I'll shave it off. And because I know I can't, I don't like facial hair. Like this is uncomfortable for me. Like it's getting long already. I don't like that. Just kind of who I am, but.
Yeah, for me, I have to rock the facial hair only because I look 10 without it. So I mean, I can't get away with it the way
Fair.
that you can. But Rose, this will be the final comment we get to tonight. Again, guys, in future shows, we'll be answering more for sure. Appreciate everyone here in the live stream. The reason why I want to touch on this, because Rose says, how does Record feel about our catchers? Is because since the last episode, there was news that happened with a catcher, and I want to make sure I didn't miss it. Tomas Nido signed a 2-year extension with the Mets, around $3.7 million, buys out his final years of arbitration. So he'll be making, I think like 1.2 million or something this year, and then like 2 million a year, somewhere. I can't do math right now. I'm not going to bother. Anyways, he's with the Mets for another 2 years. I like that for the Mets. Obviously, make sure that they have the depth, because Nido, when looking at his numbers, was quite literally one of the best defensive catchers in all of baseball last year. And while Gold Gloves seem like they mean nothing now, he was the lone Mets Gold Glove finalist this past year. He didn't win it, but he was a finalist out of the catching position. So what's your final thoughts on how the Mets catchers are currently looking, with Narvaez and Nido leading the way and Alvarez right behind them?
Yeah, I think it's. I'm not a fan of Narvaez. Defensively, I kind of watched him. I was in AAA playing against the White Sox farm team when he was coming up, and although he's gotten a little better, at least framing wise, I just saw some laziness back there, and I think I've continued to see that at times in the big leagues. So that doesn't sit that well with me. Offensively, he was bad last year. He's had better moments, but that was in Milwaukee. I don't really trust that. Nido to me is a great defensive catcher. I'd fought for him to get more plate appearances at times over the last couple of years. He's gotten those at times, and he hasn't really taken advantage of it the way I'd like to see it. Now, last year he had, what was it, a wrist, hand, something, where he missed some time.
Yep.
And it took him a while to get back. And then towards the end of the year, we saw the power start to show up again. There's something about Nido I just really like. I don't know if it's like,
I think
he's a better
like
defensive.
Nido.
He's a better defensive catcher than I was, but I don't know if it's like a little bit of that backup catcher, like I'm just rooting for him kind of a thing. And I just want to say, so I see a little bit of myself in him. Again, better catcher than me. Don't get my words wrong here. But like, so I don't know if it's that, but I love the guy. The upside that Alvarez brings offensively is significant. It's still not an area of strength yet. Like I can't say, no matter who you put back there, that it's an area of strength yet. That said,
it's gonna be soon though. I think.
I think that said, the position has the potential.
Yes.
To get there and get there quickly. And I think that's something that outside of the year they signed McCann and they thought they were getting something different, myself included.
Me too.
You haven't been able to say about this team for a while. And so I think that's a big deal. So I like where they're at. I think they're in a better position than they were starting the year last year. Nothing against Mazika, but it just wasn't a big league catcher. And then McCann, coming off the year he came off of in 21, just you didn't have good feelings about that. And Nido, of course, like I was like, yeah, might as well make this guy the starter. And I again, like Nido. This year, I at least feel a little bit better about them. So if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, beautifully said. And the last comment I'll make here before we wrap things up is the Mets catching position is unbelievably bright. I mean, they aren't only the first team since 2011 to have 2 catching prospects in the top 10, Alvarez at 1, and Kevin Parada's already at number 3. Parada's
Yeah.
bat, similar to Alvarez, is going to quickly make him excel in the prospect rankings. And he's someone that has the athleticism too to be able to shift to left field. The Mets need him to. I mean, he's not a guy that needs to be for certain at the catching spot. If he does okay, he needs work defensively, just like Alvarez does still. But the bat is a plus, not only with him, but Alvarez. And let's also not forget, I forget the guy's name, and shame on me for that. But a couple years ago, when the Mets did the trade with the Joe Musgrove trade, the 3-way trade, what they sent to the Pirates in that deal in return for getting Joey Lucchesi from the Padres, they sent a catching prospect. That's one of the better ones in the game, too. That's a top prospect for the Pirates. I'm blanking on his name, and I apologize.
Andy Rodriguez?
Yes, Andy. Yes. Yep. 100%. Yeah, I haven't heard his name in a minute, but I remember when they made that deal because I saw his numbers a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh, wow, they're still looking good. So, I mean, the Mets catching position has plenty of depth going forward, even after losing him, and that's great to see. But with that being said, that's going to wrap up episode 43 of Bleav in Queens. I hope you guys enjoyed wherever you get your audio podcast or here on YouTube. Really does mean a lot. Make sure to smash all those buttons and stay tuned. We will be back here next Tuesday. As of now, barring any breaking news, Rec, you are not going to be here, correct? So just going to be Joe and I, unless we have potentially a special guest. So maybe we'll see what happens there. But Rec, any final remarks before we get out of here?
I'm going to be on an airplane next Tuesday. I'll also be on the airplane this Thursday with 3 kids flying across the country. Everybody pray for me.
I wish you luck. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And this is Wardy and Wrecker signing out. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.